Hello everyone and welcome back. So for today's video we're going to be taking another look at this creative stamping magazine. This is issue 85 and this is the Tropical Treetops stamp set, and we've got the coordinating papers to go with it. So I'm going to be creating 3 cards in this video and just giving you a little bit of inspiration on what you can do using this stamp set, and we're going to be including the papers in this video. So you can see here we've got our first card. So I have sort of prepped everything. I'm using this backing paper. I absolutely love this. One of my favourites that have come from this particular set. So I've just backed that onto some yellow. So again, that yellow was part of the paper pack. So I've just done a little bit of matte and layer in there. I've got this blank piece of white cardstock that we're going to be doing a really cool background on. I've stamped the leopard and the branch, and I've cut that out using my scanning cut machine, and that's going to be our sort of topper for the card, and then we're just going to be white embossing a sentiment onto our black cardstock. So the first thing I'm doing here is just sticking down my matte and layering, and I really love this pattern paper against that sort of mustard yellow colour. Again, I think this is probably one of my favourite papers that have come with this magazine. I really like it. So now we've got our background down, we can go ahead and sort of create our sort of mini background on this blank piece of white cardstock. So what I'm going to be doing is a little bit of ink resistant using embossing. So what I'm going to do is take 2 of the leaf images that have come in this stamp set. So I'm going to be using the large outline of the leaf, and then I'm going to be using that sort of bold sort of full coloured one as well. So you can see there I've just prepped my cardstock with an anti-static powder tool, and this has just stopped my embossing powder sticking to anything I don't want it to on my cardstock. So you can see here I'm just pulling out the stamps that I'm going to be using. Like I said, this big outline and then that sort of smaller sort of solid leaf as well. And we're going to just create a really nice white background, sort of white embossed background with these stamps. So all I'm going to do is just figure out how I'm going to sort of arrange it, because I'm going to have this branch come across the centre of this piece. I kind of want to get those leaves sort of in the right area. So just a little bit of prep beforehand just means then that I can get it in the right spot. So I put this into my stamping platform so that I can ink this up a couple times, so I can make sure that I've got that full design, especially with that sort of solid leaf shape. I want to make sure that I get a really good impression on that one. So I do this a couple of times. Now you can see with the image on the left, so that big leaf stamp, I've got just a little bit of black on there. So I'm not too worried about that, because I'm going to be using a white embossing powder. It will sort of cover that up. So like I said, I'm not too worried that that's happened. But obviously really important if you're doing something like this, just to make sure that you do clean your stamps after every use, especially if you're using a dark colour like a black ink. So once I'm happy with the sort of coverage of my ink, I'm going to go ahead and sprinkle on my white embossing powder. So I don't have any scrap paper lying around on my desk. I'm just going to use one of the pattern papers I'll be using in the next card. And I'm using this Sweet Dixie embossing powder. So this is an ultra fine, and I believe this is Glacier White. So we're just going to sprinkle that over the images that we've stamped down, and then we'll be heat setting this. So I'm going to do this over and over again, but I don't obviously want to lose any of the embossing powder that I've already put on, so I will heat set this before I finish the rest of the background. So I do sort of stamp 2 images, heat emboss it, let it sort of cool down just slightly, and then move on to the next ones. So you can see here I'm just using my heat tool, just warming up slightly before I obviously use it to melt the embossing powder. And what this is going to do is create a resist, so it's going to create a sort of barrier, so when we put our ink on it, it's still going to show up. And obviously you can't see it much here because it's white on white, but when we get our ink down, it will show up loads. So you can see here that I've just repeated the same process over and over again, and then we've created a really nice white embossed background piece. So all I'm going to do now is take 3 different shades of green. So I'm going to be using my Prism World of Colour ink pads. So I've got Evergreen as my darkest, Rainforest Green and Olive Green as my lightest. So I'm just going to take this blending brush tool, and I'm going to start with that Rainforest right in the middle. I'm going to do sort of an ombre effect here. So I'm going to start with the olive at the top, and then I'm going to have the evergreen at the bottom. So you can see here already, just by adding that little tiny bit of colour, that white is really showing through. So these are a dye-based ink, so that white embossing, you will still be able to see all the way through it. If you do get a little bit of colour on it, you can sort of buffer it off. I would probably use either a paper towel or sort of like a microfiber cloth, something quite soft, but I don't need to do this in this instant because I didn't find that it sort of took away too much of that white. So I really love how this is coming together. I really love the look of the outline. I do like that solid white as well, but I do think that outline sort of works really, really well. And I think that would make a good background just doing all of that by itself. So again, this is another really great way of using your stamps to create something a little bit more interesting. It's super easy to do. Obviously, you can do any colours that blend well together, and I think it just creates a really fantastic background. So you can see here what the card is going to sort of look like. It's sort of come together really nicely. The last thing that we need to do is just colour in our images. So we've got our branch there and then our leopard as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and use my Spectrum Noir Tri-Blend markers. So I'm just going to do some really basic colour in here. I'm not sort of worried about doing anything too special. When it comes to the animals, obviously some animals you can sort of get away with doing sort of different kinds of colour in different colours, but sometimes with animals like this, obviously you can't just I don't know, where you could have a pink one if you wanted to, you could have a green one if you wanted to, but I always find it a little bit harder to try and make them sort of as realistic as possible. So what I've done is just taken this tanned blend, and I've used a little bit of light yellow as well, just to give it sort of that yellowish colour that I think they do have. So I'm quite happy with the way it turned out, because considering this is the first time I've coloured it in. Like I said, if you're wondering how I've cut these images out, I did pop them through my brother's scan and cut machine, just with a little border, a little white border around the edge, and they've cut all these images out perfectly because I'm no good at fussy cutting. So you can see the design that we've got going on here. So the last thing we need to do is just pop our sentiment on. So I'm going to white heat emboss this happy birthday sentiment onto some black cardstock, and then we've just got a really nice simple sentiment that can go on our card and it finish off nicely. So you can see here as well, I'm using that same Sweet Dixie embossing powder again, the ultra fine, because the font itself is quite fine. You want to use something sort of a little bit of a thinner grain. So we've just cut that out, and then that's just going to go on the bottom of our card. So we can go ahead and stick all this together, and then that'll be our first card all finished. So everything else I just popped down with some that tape roll, but the leopard and the happy birthday sentiment I just pop onto some foam pads just to give it a little bit of dimension and just give it something a little bit different. So I really love how this card has come out. I think before I coloured in the images, I was a bit unsure maybe of using the yellow matte behind that background, but I think then sort of tying that in with the yellow of the leopard I think has worked really well. Like I said, I really love that black and white background. I think it's really simple. It's not sort of too overpowering, because I wanted the main focus to be that background that we created using that embossed sort of resist technique. I think it definitely depends on what kind of images you use, but with these images that we have used, I think it's worked really, really well. So that's our first card all finished, and it's really quite a simple card to put together, but I think it looks really effective, and we've used all of the elements that have come with this month's magazine. So now let's move on to our next card. So again, for this card, I've prepped all of the bits that I needed to create this card, and we're going to be making an A5 size card. So the first thing I've done is just stamped this block leaf that we've got here, and I've just used those same green shades again, the rainforest green, olive and evergreen. And again, I've just used my brother's scan and cut machine just to cut those images out. So that's just going to add a little bit of foliage onto our card. You can see here I've got this Hooray topper, and again that's come from this paper pack. So you've got this page here which is sort of full of toppers and sentiments you can use. So I wanted to sort of get the most out of this paper pack as possible. I didn't want to be adding anything else sort of in from my own personal stash. And you can see here the two papers that we'll be using on the card. So the first thing I'm going to do is just stick down, sort of matte and layer our sentiment. And again, this is just going on to some of the sort of plain colour that's come included in this paper pack. The one thing I will say about the papers, the actual designs and the colours are absolutely lovely. I really like them. However, they're not the best to cut. You can see here that I've decided to go from using my paper trimmer to using a craft knife. So I don't ever really get my craft knife out. I don't ever feel like I need to, but I think the quality of the paper, it wasn't sort of good enough to go through my paper trimmer, even though the blade I've got in it is really sharp. Every time I tried to put it through, it really ripped the paper up. So I'm a little bit disappointed that the paper itself isn't sort of better quality. It's probably only around sort of 80 GSM, but like I said, I don't know, it's not sort of like proper paper. I'm not really sure what it is, but like I said, it just kind of tears when you try to put it through the paper trimmer. So like I said, I'm just using my craft knife, and please excuse my ruler. I've had that for about probably 10 years since I've been in school. It's just stayed with me this long, but it's really mucky. It doesn't even lie flat anymore. So in terms of what we're doing here with the card, so I'm just creating a sort of a banner for this card. So I've created something quite thick, so I want this to be sort of the main focus of the card. So it's almost going to be sort of like a piece of ribbon, but obviously made out of paper. So I've taken this design paper as well. I'm just doing the exact same thing. I'm just going to be cutting it down, and I'm going to be creating a smaller sort of ribbon end, and I'm going to be popping that over the first one that we've done. So with a pattern paper like this, you want to think about sort of where you're cutting and what you're going to be leaving in the design. So I really liked, you got the flamingo, and you've got a couple of those sort of little tags in there as well. So you've got sort of happy in there. So I really liked this kind of paper. It's really, really nice, very birthday themed. I think it's perfect for this sort of tropical sort of theme. So you can see the sort of direction that we're going in for this particular card. So one's just going to lay on top of the other. And like I said, just create that sort of ribbon, sort of rosette effect. And we're just going to have that sort of coming down the page. So again, this is a really simple design. In terms of what we're using, everything has come pretty much from this sort of magazine and all the freebies that have come with it. And I just really want to show you that you don't have to add lots of other sort of products or anything into the stash if you haven't got them. It's perfect when they sort of add in the papers to go with the sets they're using as well, because it means then you can sort of use them in different ways and create sort of different cards again. So all we're doing now is just going to be sticking down these leaves. So I'm just going to use these leaves just to create a little bit more interest on the card. So there's lots of other things you can add to this. Like I said, I'm just trying to keep it a little bit simple with what came free. So I'm just using these leaves just to sort of add a little bit more colour, add a little bit more depth to the card. And you can see that's going to go behind this hooray that we've created here, we've matted, again just using the papers that have come free. So I really like the fact that they've put some sort of sentiments, sort of toppers and things in there as well, not just in this sort of tropical theme, but also sort of different kinds of designs in there as well, so you can use them for sort of lots of different projects. So all we're going to do to finish this card off is just pop this topper onto some foam pads just to lift it and give it a little bit of dimension, and then we're just going to pop it down on the card. So you could do this with a much smaller card and you might not have sort of as much free space, but I really didn't want to hide too much of that patterned paper because I do really like it. I think it works really well. So that is our second card all done. We can go ahead and get started on the third card. So again, I've got everything prepped ready for this card, everything sort of cut out. So again, we're going to be making an A5 size card. So again, a big card, because this paper that you've got here is really big and bold. I wanted a big card to put it on to get sort of as much in there as possible. So you can see I've stamped and cut, again using my scan and cut machine, quite a few of the images, and we've got the parrot as well we're going to be using on this card. I've got this little strip of white, which we're just going to create a little sort of matte edge, so like a fake matte edge. So this is a really great way if you don't want to sort of waste too much cardstock by sort of matte and layering. You can cut little strips like this, just pop it sort of behind one side, and that'll give you the illusion that you've sort of matte and layered it. So I'm just going to pop some adhesive just down the one side of our card, and then I'm going to use this strip and I'm just going to line it up so it looks like we've got a layer just on this one side, and that'll just make our card a little bit more interesting and give it a little bit more depth. So I do really love this yellow colour. This sort of mustard is my absolute favourite, and I think it just works really well with sort of all the papers that have come in this set. So once we've got that on, we can go ahead and just stick that onto the card. So this piece of patterned paper here is going to cover sort of half of our card design. And then we've got that piece of white blank cardstock that's going to go in the middle that we are going to decorate. So again, just giving the card just a little bit of interest by adding that pattern paper, and it's big and bold enough where it doesn't sort of get too lost in the background. So the first thing I'm going to do is stamp my sentiment directly onto this cardstock. So the sentiment we're using is "Send in Sunshine." So I really like this sentiment, especially at the moment. It's sort of really happy and sort of sending, you want to send sort of good vibes and happiness to people. So just to give this card a little bit more interest, I'm just doing a dashed border. So I'm just using a black fine liner just to go around the edge, just like I said, to give it a little bit more interest. If you have got a stitched edge die, you could do that, but I'm just using a fine liner just to put that detail on there. Then all we're going to do now is just adhere this down onto the card, and then we can go ahead and start colouring the stamped images. So for the images, I have stamped this in the Spectrum Noir. This is the Finesse alcohol proof ink pad. So if you are going to be using your alcohol markers, make sure you are using the right kind of ink pad, the outline ink pad, because you don't want anything to sort of bleed or sort of ruin the images that you've stamped and cut out. So again, I'm just going to use my tri-blend markers. I'm just going to do some really basic colour in here. I'm not sort of too worried about making it perfect, just some really basic blending, basic sort of shadowing, but obviously using these pens make it really easy. It makes an easy job of it because the colours blend really well. I don't have to sort of think too much about making sure I've got the right colours. I know everything is going to blend perfectly. So you can see I'm using two different colours here. So I've got the citrus green, and then I've got this light green as well, just to sort of give the card a little bit more dimension, a little bit more depth. I don't want to be using the same colour sort of over and over again. So we've got these big leaves, then I've got these really small sort of bits of foliage. I think these are perfect, just sort of adds just a little bit of extra detail onto your project, makes everything look just a little bit more realistic. So once I've got all of those coloured in, I'm going to move on to colouring in this parrot. So I've got it on the branch here, or stamped it with the branch here. So just going to ground that parrot just a little bit into the card. So we're going to be creating a little sort of cluster on the bottom left-hand corner. So I think this parrot I want to stand out. I want you to be able to see it sort of amongst all of the greenery and then the flowers we're going to be colouring in. So I am sort of trying to keep it as bright as possible. But again, nothing special in the way of actual colouring or blending. You can sort of do whatever you want to do with this, whatever colours you want to use. Really, when it comes to things like this, you can sort of just do whatever you want that just sort of fits in with the theme of your card. So the last thing we've got to colour in is these 3 hibiscus flowers as well. I really like these. Again, really simple sort of little flowers that go perfect with this tropical theme. And again, we're just going to go in with that sort of tropical colours and a little bit of light shading. So once you've got all the shading done, you can start thinking about how I'm going to arrange sort of all of these images. So before I go ahead and stick anything down, I do kind of arrange a design that I want to follow to make sure that I get everything in the right place, make sure I can fit everything in, and that I get a good balance sort of on the card itself. So before I use the tape pen, but I'm going to be using a liquid glue now to adhere these down, because I want to have just a little bit of wiggle room just to kind of move things about, put some images behind others sort of when I get to it. So I think liquid glue is sort of the perfect adhesive for doing things like this. So we've got quite a big white gap to fill, sort of on the bottom half of this piece of cardstock. So I am sort of trying to sort of spread it out as much as possible, but I don't want to have sort of any gaps or anything in between my images. So it's just finding that balance, like I said before, just sort of working on the design before you stick it down probably is the best thing to do, just to make sure you get it all in the right place. And I don't really want it too sort of bunched up or anything. So our little scene here is sort of building up really nicely and really quite quickly as well. So once you've, like I said, got that design down, then it's pretty easy just to sort of get it going. I do want to just try and hide that corner as much as possible, and I think these really big leaves are absolutely perfect for that. It's really nice to have that bit of pop of colour in there as well from the flowers. I just think everything works together really well, and again with that backing paper, I think it just all comes together perfectly. I also really love these little foliage stamps as well, because like I said, it just sort of fills in those gaps really nicely. They don't sort of draw the eye away from anything. I think they work together really well, and I think sort of stamps like that are the ones that I do tend to reach for more often. Like I said, if you just got a small gap that you want to fill, they are absolutely perfect for that. So that's pretty much our card finished. So again, I really love the way this has come out. I really do love this stamp set. So what I'll do is show you all 3 of the cards again, so you can see what we have created in this video. So here was that first card again. So I really love this heat embossed resist technique that we've done to create this background. I think it works perfectly with these sort of tropical themed images. I think using that leopard on the branch, I think that branch itself sort of lends itself really well to put in sort of lots of different animals, lots of different sort of images on top of it. And again, it's nice just to have sort of that leopard on there just for something a little bit different. And again, a really nice sort of easy sentiment that you can use on lots of different cards. Then the next card we created here on the left. So again, something really simple, but again, using everything that's come within this set. So I really love the papers that came with it. So we've used 2 different ones here just to create this sort of ribbon banner effect. And the fact then you've got some toppers and some sentiments already within these papers that you can just cut out, pop on top, I think is perfect. And it's got those plain colours in there as well for you to be able to mat and layer perfectly. So again, those stamp leaves as well, that solid stamp, again lends itself really well to being part of that tropical theme, being able to sort of put your own stamp on things, sort of using different colours. I think you'll be able to use those again in lots of different ways. And then we've got our final card on the right here. I love this big sort of bold patterned paper. I think it works really well on bigger cards and projects, because if you sort of cut it down too small, you might sort of miss most of that sort of pattern that's in there. Again, a really lovely sentiment, Scent and Sunshine, I think is perfect at the moment. But I really love how all of these stamps, you know, this is a big A4 stamp set, and I love how all of them just work so well together. You know, I've got a handful of different stamps sort of all put together in quite a small area, but I don't think anything gets lost. They all complement each other really well, and I've used quite sort of classic tropical colours here, but you really could sort of do whatever you wanted to do with them really, and I think you just work really perfectly together. So I really enjoyed creating all 3 of these cards. What I do love about subscribing to these magazines and getting these stamp sets is I get stuff that I wouldn't necessarily buy myself, but it means then that I'm challenging myself to think sort of how I can use these, sort of make the most of them, what kind of projects that I can create using them. And I think it really kind of challenges me and sort of takes me out of my comfort zone a little bit. So I really enjoy sort of subscribing and getting these gifts as well. And they're perfect for so many different people and so many different occasions. It means now that I'm building up a stash to have something in there really for everyone. So I think it's a really fantastic idea, sort of getting these magazines, and not only then that, but everything that comes within the magazine, or the tips and the ideas and things. I think it's really, really worth the money. So I really hope you enjoyed today's video. The next video that you'll see, I'm going to be sort of combining this particular stamp set with then the Simply Cards and Papercraft stamp set. Again, that is another tropical themed stamp set, and they have been designed to work together. So I'm going to be creating a couple of cards or a particular project using those two together. So if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss out on that video or any future videos that I do. Again, so I subscribe to both of these magazines, so there will be videos each month using the free items that come with it. So if you like this particular video, please give it a thumbs up or leave a comment down below. Like I said, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe so you don't miss anything. Thanks very much for watching, and happy crafting.